Before we begin, a critical disclaimer. The information in this video is for educational and informational purposes only and is not intended as a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. I am not a medical doctor. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have seen in this presentation. The use of any information provided in this video is solely at your own risk. Imagine this for a second. You've tried everything. You've counted every calorie, sweated through every spin class, and emptied your wallet on meal plans that promised the world but delivered disappointment. You've done the low carb, the no carb, the paleo, the intermittent fasting. You've lived through the cycle of losing 5 pounds, feeling that rush of victory, only to gain back 7, along with a crushing sense of failure. It feels like you're fighting a battle against your own body, a battle you're destined to lose. Then something shifts. You start to notice it. A coworker who struggled for years suddenly looks different, healthier, more confident. Your favorite celebrity, once the subject of cruel tabloid headlines, is now gracing magazine covers with a transformed physique. You see it on social media, you hear it whispered about at family gatherings. There's a secret, a revolution happening quietly, behind closed doors and in doctors' offices across America. And the secret isn't a new diet, a brutal workout regimen, or an ironclad force of will. It's a tiny needle, a once-a-week injection. We're talking about a new class of drugs with names that have become as common as Tylenol or Advil. Ozempic, Wegovy, Mounjaro. These aren't just medications anymore. They're cultural phenomena. They are the #1 topic of conversation at dinner parties in Los Angeles and the subject of heated debate in boardrooms on Wall Street. They've been praised on daytime television and lampooned in late-night monologues. In the United States, the demand is so explosive that it's causing nationwide shortages, pitting patient against patient in a desperate search for supply. But what are these injections, really? How did they go from being relatively obscure diabetes treatments to the most sought-after, controversial, and talked about weight loss tools in modern history? Are they the miracle cure we've been waiting for? A genuine medical breakthrough that could finally turn the tide on the obesity epidemic that affects over 40% of American adults? Or are they a dangerous shortcut, a biological hack with unforeseen consequences and a price tag that puts them out of reach for the very people who might need them most? This is the fundamental question we're going to answer. We are going to cut through the celebrity gossip, the TikTok trends, and the sensationalist headlines to give you the unvarnished truth. In this deep dive, you will understand the powerful science that makes these drugs work. A science that fundamentally rewires the conversation between your gut and your brain. You will learn about the people whose lives have been transformed and the people who have faced terrifying side effects. We will expose the myths, explore the ethics, and examine the staggering economic impact of a market projected to be worth $100 billion. By the time you finish watching, you will not just understand the buzz. You will be one of the most informed people you know on a topic that is reshaping American medicine, culture, and our very relationship with food in our bodies. This isn't just a story about a drug. It's a story about our deepest insecurities, our most desperate hopes, and the relentless multi-billion-dollar pursuit of a solution to one of humanity's oldest problems. To truly grasp why this moment is so revolutionary, we have to understand why everything that came before it failed so spectacularly. For decades, the weight loss industry has been a graveyard of broken promises. Think about it. The 80s gave us the low-fat craze, powered by aerobics and neon spandex, which ironically coincided with a massive spike in sugar consumption and obesity rates. The 90s brought us the Atkins revolution and infomercials pushing vibrating of belts and thigh masters, promising rock-hard abs while you watched TV. Then came the new millennium and a wave of diet pills, each one hailed as the next big thing before quietly disappearing or being pulled from the market for causing terrifying side effects. Remember fen-phen? A combination of drugs that promised to melt fat away, but was later found to cause potentially fatal heart valve damage. Or sibutramine, sold as Meridia, which was linked to an increased risk of heart attack and stroke. For years, the message from the pharmaceutical industry was a painful one. We can either give you a pill that barely works, or we can give you one that might kill you. The public, burned time and time again, grew cynical. The prevailing wisdom, preached by doctors and fitness gurus alike, was that there were no shortcuts. The only path was the hard path. Eat less, move more. Diet and exercise. It was a simple, elegant formula that carried with it a heavy moral judgment. If you were overweight, it wasn't a medical condition, it was a personal failing, a lack of discipline, a weakness of character. This narrative has been the bedrock of our culture's approach to weight for half a century. And that is precisely why the arrival of these new injections feels like a seismic shock. They don't just work. They work in a way that feels almost like magic, challenging that core belief that weight loss must be a product of suffering and immense willpower. These drugs, known as GLP-1 agonists, operate on a completely different level. They don't just jack up your metabolism with stimulants or trick your body into flushing out water weight. They fundamentally change your biology. They quiet the food noise, that constant nagging chatter in your brain telling you to eat. They make you feel full on a fraction of the food you used to consume. They slow down digestion, making that feeling of satiety last for hours, even days. For the first time, a medication is offering to do what millions of people have been unable to do on their own: control their appetite at its source. It's a tool that addresses the biological drivers of hunger, not just the behavioral symptoms. This is not another fen-phen. This is a new frontier. And it's this profound difference that has ignited the firestorm of hype, hope, and controversy we see today. It's why your neighbor is suddenly dropping pounds, why Hollywood seems to have collectively shrunk by 2 dress sizes, and why pharmaceutical companies are now valued higher than some national economies. So how did we get here? How did a class of drugs, initially developed to help manage blood sugar in type 2 diabetics, become the biggest cultural and medical story of the decade? The journey didn't start in a high-tech Silicon Valley lab or a New York City boardroom. It started in a place you would never ever expect, with the venom of a monster, the Gila monster, a stout, slow-moving lizard, painted in mesmerizing patterns of black, pink, and yellow, crawling through the arid landscapes of the American Southwest and Mexico. It's one of only a handful of venomous lizards in the world, and its reputation precedes it. For centuries, it was a creature of myth and fear, its venom fabled to be fatal, its breath said to be a toxic vapor. While some of that is folklore, its bite is excruciatingly painful. But the Gila monster's most remarkable secret isn't in the power of its venom to harm, but in its potential to heal. And it all comes down to its bizarre lifestyle. Unlike most animals, the Gila monster is a master of feast and famine. It might eat only 3 or 4 massive meals a year, gorging itself on eggs, small birds, and rodents, consuming up to a third of its body weight in a single sitting. Then, for months on end, nothing. It retreats to its burrow and waits. This presents a profound biological puzzle. How does an animal maintain stable blood sugar and energy levels with such an extreme, erratic diet? How does it survive the massive sugar spike from a giant meal, and then endure months of starvation without its metabolism going haywire? This very question captivated an endocrinologist named Dr. John Eng, working in the 1980s at the Veterans Affairs Medical Center in the Bronx, New York, about as far from the Sonoran Desert as you can get. Dr. Eng was on a quest. He was hunting for new hormones, the chemical messengers that run our bodies, but he wasn't looking in the usual places. He had a hunch that the most powerful and unusual biological compounds on Earth could be found in the toxins of nature, in the venom of snakes, spiders, and yes, lizards. Venom, after all, is a cocktail of potent molecules designed to hijack and disrupt a victim's physiology. Dr. Eng wondered if, hidden within that destructive power, there were keys to controlling our own physiology for the better. He began analyzing the venom of the Gila monster. It was a painstaking process, and in 1990 he found it, a previously undiscovered hormone lurking in the lizard's saliva. He called it exendenfor. When he studied its structure, he was stunned. It looked remarkably similar to a hormone in the human gut called GLP-1. Now, GLP-1, or glucagon-like peptide 1, is a crucial part of how our bodies handle food. When you eat a meal, your intestines release GLP-1. It acts like a master conductor for your metabolism. First, it travels to your pancreas and tells it to release insulin, which helps your cells absorb sugar from your bloodstream, keeping your blood sugar levels in check. Second, it sends a signal to your stomach to slow down, a process called gastric emptying. By keeping food in your stomach for longer, it makes you feel physically full for an extended period. And third, it travels all the way to your brain, specifically to the hypothalamus, the region that controls hunger and satiety. It binds to receptors there and essentially tells your brain, hey, we're good. We've got fuel. You can stop feeling hungry now. So GLP-1 is our body's natural appetite suppressant and blood sugar regulator. It's a perfect system, except for one major flaw. The human body is incredibly efficient. It releases GLP-1 when you eat, and then, almost as quickly, it gets rid of it. An enzyme called DPP4 swoops in and breaks down GLP-1 within about 2 minutes. Its message is delivered and then it's gone. This is great for normal minute-to-minute regulation, but it's not powerful enough to be used as a long-term therapeutic drug for someone with diabetes or obesity. A medicine that only works for 2 minutes is no medicine at all. This is where the Gila monster's secret comes in. Dr. Ng discovered that the lizard's version of this hormone, exendin-4, did everything human GLP-1 did, but on an entirely different level. It was a supercharged version. And most importantly, it had a crucial evolutionary tweak in its molecular structure that made it almost completely resistant to that pesky DPP4 enzyme. It was a chemical shield. So, while human GLP-1 lasted for a couple of minutes, the Gila monster's exendin-4 could circulate in the body and keep working for hours. This was the eureka moment. The lizard's bizarre eating schedule had forced it to evolve a biological masterpiece. It needed a hormone that could handle a massive influx of food and then keep its system stable for months. It needed a long-lasting, powerful version of GLP-1, and Dr. Ng had found it. He realized this wasn't just a scientific curiosity, it was a potential medical revolution. Here was a naturally occurring molecule that could, in theory, provide sustained blood sugar control and appetite suppression in humans. Dr. Ng patented his discovery and in 1996, licensed it to a small San Diego biotech company called Amylin Pharmaceuticals. For nearly a decade, Amylin worked to turn this venom-derived compound into a viable drug for humans. They developed a synthetic, lab-grown version of exendin-4, ensuring it was safe and consistent. The drug, given the brand name Byetta, went through years of clinical trials. The results were exactly what they'd hoped for. In patients with type 2 diabetes, it significantly improved their blood sugar control. In April 2005, the FDA gave Byetta the green light. It was approved exclusively for the treatment of type 2 diabetes. But almost immediately, something else became apparent. Patients taking Byetta, and the doctors prescribing it, noticed a consistent and powerful side effect: they were losing weight. A lot of weight. This wasn't a mystery. It was the Gila monster's biological mechanism working exactly as intended. By slowing down digestion and sending powerful satiety signals to the brain, the drug was making people feel fuller on less food. They were naturally eating less because the constant nagging food noise in their heads was being turned down, or in some cases silenced completely. Byetta was a breakthrough. It proved that targeting the GLP-1 pathway was an incredibly effective strategy for managing diabetes, with the added, and for many people life-changing benefit of weight loss. The secret that had been hidden in a desert lizard's venom was now a multi-million-dollar prescription drug. But the story was far from over. Byetta, for all its success, had a significant drawback. Because its effects, while lasting for hours, still wore off, patients had to inject it twice every single day. Once in the morning and once in the evening. It was effective, but it was inconvenient. The compliance rate was a challenge. People just don't like giving themselves shots twice a day, every day. The success of Byetta, however, opened the floodgates. It was proof of concept. The entire pharmaceutical industry snapped to attention. They saw the billion-dollar potential. The race was on. Every major drug company knew the goal. Take the principle discovered from the Gila monster and perfect it. The Holy Grail was no longer just a drug that worked, but a drug that was convenient. They needed to create a GLP-1 analog that was so long-lasting, so resilient, that a patient would only need to inject it once a week. This new quest would trigger a scientific arms race, a battle of molecular engineering between pharmaceutical giants. It would lead to the development of new molecules, even more potent than the one found in the lizard's venom. And one company, a Danish firm with a century of experience in diabetes, was about to take the lead. Their work would build upon the legacy of the Gila monster to create a drug that wouldn't just change the treatment of diabetes, but would ignite a cultural firestorm and completely reshape our entire conversation about weight itself. And at the starting line of this race were two titans of the pharmaceutical world, locked in a century-long rivalry: Novo Nordisk, the Danish powerhouse, and Eli Lilly, the American giant. For decades, their battleground had been insulin. They were the undisputed kings of diabetes management, and their fortunes were built on helping millions of people control their blood sugar. But the discovery of GLP-1 was like finding a new, uncharted continent. It was a whole new frontier, and both companies knew that whoever could conquer it first wouldn't just win a battle. They could win the war for the future of metabolic medicine. The challenge was clear. The GLP-1 our own bodies produce is incredibly fleeting. It does its job and is then destroyed by an enzyme called DP4 in less than 2 minutes. It's like a text message that self-destructs almost as soon as you read it. The Gila Monster's version, Xendin 4, was a huge improvement, lasting for hours. But for a drug to be truly practical for humans, it needed to be even better. It needed to be convenient, consistent, and potent. The race wasn't just to mimic nature. It was to perfect it. Novo Nordisk was the first to land a major blow. Their scientists embarked on a painstaking process of molecular engineering. They took the human GLP-1 molecule as their template and began to tweak it, looking for a way to build a shield around it, to protect it from that destructive DPP4 enzyme. Their breakthrough was a clever piece of biochemical artistry. They attached a fatty acid chain to the GLP-1 molecule. This might sound simple, but it was revolutionary. This fatty acid acted like a VIP pass, allowing the molecule to bind to a protein in our blood called albumin. Albumin is like a massive, slow-moving cargo ship in our bloodstream. By hitching a ride on it, the modified GLP-1 molecule was not only shielded from the enzyme that wanted to destroy it, but it was also released slowly and steadily over a much longer period. They had transformed a 2-minute signal into a 24-hour presence. They had created a drug they called liraglutide. In 2010, liraglutide hit the market under the brand name Victoza, approved as a once-daily injection for type 2 diabetes. And it worked brilliantly. It lowered blood sugar, it reduced A1C levels, and it did so with a lower risk of hypoglycemia than many older diabetes drugs. For the diabetes community, it was a significant step forward. But inside the clinical trials, something else was happening. A side effect that no one had been looking for, but that everyone was talking about. Patients weren't just reporting better blood sugar. They were reporting a loss of appetite. They felt full faster. The constant food noise in their heads, that relentless chatter about the next meal, was getting quieter. And as a result, they were losing weight. This wasn't just a little weight either. In the clinical trials for diabetes, patients on Victoza were consistently losing more weight than those on other medications. It was a consistent, statistically significant signal that was impossible to ignore. For Novo Nordisk, this was a light bulb moment of epic proportions. They had set out to build a better diabetes drug, but they had stumbled upon a potential solution to one of the biggest public health challenges of the 21st century: obesity. The company made a bold decision. They would launch a new set of clinical trials, this time specifically for weight management, using a higher dose of liraglutide. The trials, known as the SCALE program, were massive, involving thousands of patients who had obesity but not necessarily diabetes. The results were undeniable. Participants lost a clinically significant amount of body weight, on average about 8%. To put that in perspective, for someone weighing 250 pounds, that's a 20-pound loss. For a pharmaceutical intervention at the time, this was huge. Previous weight loss drugs had been plagued by scary side effects, like heart problems or psychiatric issues, and often produced only modest results. Liraglutide was different. It was working through a natural hormonal pathway, and while it had its own side effects, mostly nausea and other GI issues, it had a much safer profile. In 2014, the FDA gave its blessing. The higher dose of liraglutide was approved specifically for chronic weight management and was given a new name: Saxenda. This was a landmark event. It was the first time a GLP-1 drug was officially recognized not just as a diabetes treatment, but as a legitimate anti-obesity medication. It was the moment the conversation officially began to shift. Weight was no longer just a matter of willpower. It was a matter of biology, of hormones that could be targeted and influenced. Saxenda was the pioneer, the first shot fired in a revolution. But it was still a daily injection, and in the world of pharmaceuticals, convenience is king. While Novo Nordisk was celebrating the success of Saxenda, their rival Eli Lilly was not standing still. They had been working on their own version of a long-lasting GLP-1, and they took a different but equally ingenious approach to extend its life. Instead of binding it to albumin, they fused their GLP-1 molecule to a piece of a human antibody, an immunoglobulin G fragment. This essentially gave the drug a disguise, making it too large to be filtered out by the kidneys and protecting it from enzymatic breakdown. The result was a drug called dulaglutide, and it had one killer advantage over Victoza and Saxenda. It only had to be injected once a week. In 2014, the same year Saxenda was approved, Eli Lilly launched dulaglutide under the brand name Trulicity. Marketed exclusively for type 2 diabetes, it was an immediate blockbuster. The convenience of a weekly shot was a game-changer for patients tired of daily injections. And, just like with liraglutide, patients on Trulicity also experienced weight loss. While Eli Lilly didn't initially pursue a separate FDA approval for weight loss in the same way Novo Nordisk did with Saxenda, the effect was well known among doctors and patients. The multi-billion-dollar chess match was in full swing. Novo Nordisk had the first dedicated weight loss approval, but Lilly had the convenience of a weekly dose. For a few years, this was the state of play. A daily shot that offered moderate but groundbreaking weight loss, or a weekly shot designed for diabetes that also helped with weight. It was a monumental leap forward, but it was far from the end of the story. The truth was, these first-generation drugs, for all their success, were just the beginning. The weight loss, while significant, plateaued. For many, 8% wasn't enough to truly transform their health. The side effects, especially nausea, could be intense, causing many people to stop taking the medication. And the cost was, and remains, a massive barrier for millions. The foundation had been laid. The proof of concept was there. A hormone from a venomous lizard had inspired a new class of drugs that could safely and effectively treat both diabetes and obesity. But the scientists at both Novo Nordisk and Eli Lilly knew they could do better. They were already working on the next generation. They wanted more weight loss. They wanted fewer side effects. They wanted to create a molecule that was so effective, so powerful, it would not just be a tool for doctors but a cultural phenomenon. They were on the hunt for a true superagonist. A drug that would take the promise of liraglutide and turn the volume up to 11. And the molecule they would create, semaglutide, would do more than just win the next round of their corporate battle. It would detonate a bomb in the health and wellness industry, turning Hollywood, Wall Street, and Main Street upside down. The quiet revolution was about to become a global roar. And that roar didn't start in a boardroom or a press conference. It started, as so many modern phenomena do, as a whisper in the one place where appearance is everything. Hollywood. Before the TikToks, before the news headlines, before your cousin mentioned it at Thanksgiving, semaglutide was the best-kept secret on the red carpet. It was the miracle that allowed an actor to drop 20 pounds for a role in a month. It was the silent partner that got A-listers camera ready after a holiday. In a town built on illusion, this was the ultimate magic trick. A way to sculpt the body without the punishing discipline that even the most dedicated stars struggled to maintain. The Whisper Network was powerful. Trainers told their clients. Agents hinted at it to their talent. It became a coded currency. A sliver of insider knowledge that separated the truly connected from the merely famous. But secrets this big don't stay secret for long. The first signs for the public were the sudden, almost unbelievable physical transformations. Celebrities who had been one size for decades were suddenly dramatically slimmer. When asked, the official answer was always the same tired script. A new workout regimen, cutting out sugar, drinking more water. But the results looked different. Faster. More extreme. The math just didn't seem to add up. Tabloids and social media forums went into a frenzy of speculation. But it was all just rumor and conjecture until one of the most famous, and famously unfiltered, men in the world decided to just tell the truth. In late 2022, when a Twitter user asked Elon Musk his secret for looking awesome, fit, ripped and healthy, he didn't credit paleo or Pilates. He replied with 2 words: fasting and Wegovy. That single tweet was the spark that lit the global fire. It was a cultural inflection point. Suddenly, this wasn't some shadowy Hollywood rumor anymore. It was a real thing with a real name being used by a real, undeniably successful person. And it wasn't just any person. It was Elon Musk, the avatar of tech, progress, and life hacking. His admission didn't just confirm the drug's existence. It reframed it. It wasn't a vanity drug. It was an efficiency tool. A biohack. A technological solution to a biological problem. For millions of people who looked up to the world of Silicon Valley, this was the ultimate endorsement. The floodgates were blown open. What happened next was a social media wildfire. The conversation jumped from Twitter to the visual confessional world of TikTok. And there it mutated into a full-blown cultural movement. Suddenly, your feed was flooded with videos under hashtags like #OzempicJourney and #Manjaro. These weren't polished celebrity endorsements. They were raw, vertical videos shot on iPhones in bathrooms and car interiors. People showing off their weekly progress, holding the injection pen up to the camera, speaking with a kind of breathless, "Can you believe this excitement?" They shared before and after photos that were genuinely staggering. They described the effects in simple, incredibly potent terms. The most common refrain, the one that cut through all the noise, was about something they called food noise. It was a concept that millions of people instantly understood on a visceral level. That constant, nagging inner monologue about food. What should I eat? Did I eat too much? I shouldn't have that cookie. Maybe just one. The internal battle that so many people fight every single minute of every single day. And these users, these new converts, claim the injection just turned it off. Like flipping a switch. The silence, they said, was life-changing. This user-generated marketing was something Novo Nordisk and Eli Lilly could have only dreamed of. It was authentic, it was relentless, and it was free. The complex science of glucagon-like peptide-1 receptor agonists was boiled down into a simple, irresistible pitch. A weekly shot that silences the food noise and makes the weight just fall off. The message was clear. This isn't another failed diet. This is different. This is the easy button. But as the trend exploded, the dark side of its viral fame began to surface. The first and most immediate problem was the shortage. These drugs, remember, were primarily developed and approved for type 2 diabetes. But the tsunami of off-label prescriptions for weight loss meant that the people who medically needed the drug to manage their blood sugar couldn't find it. Pharmacies had backorders stretching for months. Diabetics, who had relied on a stable supply of Ozempic, were suddenly scrambling, calling pharmacy after pharmacy, their health hanging in the balance. It created a tense and uncomfortable ethical dilemma. Whose need was greater? The person fighting a chronic disease, or the person fighting obesity? Then came the side effects, which also got their own viral hashtags. The most famous was Ozempic face. As people lost massive amounts of weight quickly, they were also losing facial fat, leading to a gaunt, hollowed-out, and prematurely aged appearance. Dermatologists and plastic surgeons reported a surge in patients seeking fillers and procedures to counteract the effect. It was a stark visual reminder that there's no such thing as a free lunch. Rapid, chemically induced weight loss had aesthetic consequences that the glowing TikTok videos often left out. And as the official supply chains buckled under the demand, a dangerous gray market began to flourish. If you couldn't get a prescription or your insurance wouldn't cover the $1,000 a month price tag, you could turn to the internet. Compounding pharmacies began mixing their own versions of semaglutide, with little to no regulatory oversight. Shady online sellers offered vials of questionable origin shipped from overseas. People were injecting themselves with substances they knew little about, driven by a desperate desire for the results they saw on their phones. The miracle drug was now creating a public health minefield. The phenomenon had officially made the jump from the coasts to the heartland. It was no longer just about Hollywood elites or Silicon Valley CEOs. The conversation was happening everywhere. At the office, people would whisper about a coworker who had suddenly dropped 3 dress sizes. At family barbecues, someone would mention a friend who got a prescription from an online service without ever seeing a doctor in person. This widespread adoption was supercharged by another post-pandemic revolution: telehealth. The rise of direct-to-consumer digital health platforms made accessing these drugs astonishingly simple. Companies with slick branding and user-friendly apps popped up, promising easy online consultations. You could fill out a questionnaire, have a brief video call, or sometimes just a text exchange with a doctor or nurse practitioner, and have a prescription sent to your local pharmacy, or even delivered directly to your door. The traditional gatekeepers were gone. The friction of having to schedule an appointment, go to a doctor's office, and have a potentially embarrassing conversation about your weight was completely removed. You could do it all from the comfort of your couch. This unprecedented accessibility was the final booster rocket, launching these injections from a viral trend into a staple of modern American life. In just a couple of years, a niche diabetes medication had followed a trajectory that was rewriting the rules of medicine, marketing, and culture. It had gone from the lab to the red carpet to Elon Musk's Twitter feed to your neighbor's refrigerator. The demand was insatiable, the profits were astronomical, and the societal impact was just beginning to be understood. But as millions of people began this new journey, they were all, in a way, part of a massive, uncontrolled experiment. And the biggest question of all still loomed, unanswered. What happens next? What happens when the shots stop? The answer, as the first wave of long-term data began to trickle in, was both simple and devastating. For the vast majority of people, the weight comes back. It doesn't just creep back. For many, it returns with a vengeance, a relentless tide reclaiming lost ground. This isn't a story of failure or a lack of willpower. It's a story of biology, a powerful lesson in how deeply the human body is programmed to defend its weight. To understand this phenomenon, this cruel reversal that has left so many feeling defeated, we have to go back to the brain. Remember that food noise we talked about? That constant, nagging chatter about your next meal? The intrusive thoughts about calories, the mental battle fought over a cookie? GLP-1 agonists don't just work on your stomach. Their primary battlefield is the brain. They effectively turn down the volume on that noise, creating a sense of quiet and control that many users describe as life-changing. They're not just less hungry, they're mentally free from the obsession with food. But what happens when the medication is withdrawn? The drug isn't a cure, it's a management tool. It's like a dam holding back a river of hunger signals. When you stop the weekly injections, you're not just removing a few bricks from the dam, you're dynamiting the entire structure. The river of food noise doesn't just return to its previous level, it comes roaring back as a flash flood. The brain, deprived of the GLP-1 signal it has grown accustomed to, starts screaming for energy. The satiety signals that were once amplified now fall silent. The reward centers that were once placated now demand satisfaction with an intensity that can feel overwhelming. This isn't speculation. It's borne out by the very clinical trials that got these drugs approved. The most famous of these is the Step 1 trial for Wegovy. After 68 weeks on the drug, participants lost an average of nearly 15% of their body weight. It was a stunning success. But the researchers didn't stop there. They conducted an extension study where a group of these successful participants were taken off the drug and monitored for another year. The results were sobering. Within 1 year of stopping the medication, these individuals had regained, on average, 2/3 of the weight they had lost. Let that sink in. 2/3. A person who lost 60 pounds would, on average, gain 40 of them back within a year of their last shot. And the data suggested the trend was continuing upwards. The body was fighting tooth and nail to return to what it considered its normal state, its set point. This concept of a body weight set point is critical. Think of it like a thermostat in your house. You can open a window in the winter to cool the room down, but as soon as you do, the thermostat senses the change and kicks the furnace into overdrive to bring the temperature back up to its setting. Your body does the same with weight. For individuals with obesity, that thermostat is simply set higher. Decades of dieting research have shown that when you lose weight through calorie restriction, your body fights back. It slows down your metabolism to conserve energy, and it ramps up hunger hormones to drive you to eat. It's a survival mechanism honed over millennia. What these new injections do is, in essence, hack the thermostat. They artificially lower the set point, convincing the body that a lower weight is the new normal. The furnace of metabolism doesn't fight back as hard, and the alarm bells of hunger don't ring as loudly. But the moment you stop the drug, the hack is over. The body's original programming reasserts itself, and the thermostat is immediately reset to its original, higher temperature. The furnace roars to life. The physical reality of this rebound is matched, and often surpassed, by the psychological toll. Imagine for a moment what that feels like. For the first time in your adult life, you felt in control. You could walk past a bakery without a second thought. You could leave food on your plate because you were genuinely full. You weren't just losing weight. You were shedding a lifetime of shame and anxiety around food. You felt normal. And then it's gone. The food noise returns, louder than ever. The cravings feel primal, uncontrollable. Every pound that returns feels like a personal failure, even though it's a predictable biological response. The clothes that fit perfectly a few months ago start to feel tight again. The compliments from friends and family are replaced by a worried silence. It can be a deeply isolating and demoralizing experience. People report feeling a sense of grief not just for the body they lost, but for the mental peace they lost. They are thrown back into a battle they thought they had finally won, only to find their best weapon has been taken away. This reality has forced a seismic shift in how the medical community views obesity. For years, the prevailing approach was often short-term: lose the weight, then try to maintain it with diet and exercise. These drugs have exposed the flaw in that logic. Obesity isn't an acute problem you can solve with a 6-month fix. It's a chronic, relapsing disease, much like high blood pressure or type 2 diabetes. You wouldn't tell a patient with hypertension to take blood pressure medication for a year, and then stop, hoping their blood pressure magically stays low forever. It's understood to be a lifelong management strategy, and that is the new, emerging consensus for these weight loss injections. They are not a temporary boost, a kickstart to a new lifestyle. For most people, to maintain the benefits, they must be taken for life. This realization is a bombshell, both for patients and for the healthcare system. It reframes the entire conversation from a weight loss journey, with a finish line, to a permanent state of medical treatment. This idea of a forever drug for weight is revolutionary. And it raises a cascade of new, incredibly complex questions. If millions of Americans are to take these powerful, hormone-altering drugs every single week for the rest of their lives, what does that mean? What are the implications for their bodies over a span of 20, 30, or 40 years? The clinical trials lasted for just over a year. But real life lasts a lot longer. We were celebrating a medical miracle, a breakthrough that promised to change everything. But as the reality of the rebound effect set in, a new, more complicated picture began to emerge. We had solved the problem of how to lose the weight, but in doing so, we had stumbled into an entirely new set of uncharted and potentially more dangerous territories. The question was no longer just about efficacy, but about endurance and what hidden costs might surface over a lifetime of use. And so, we stand at the edge of this new frontier, looking at a miracle cure that asks for something in return. Every powerful action in medicine, like in physics, has an equal and opposite reaction. For every pound shed, for every inch lost, there is a biological invoice waiting to be paid. This isn't a story of good versus evil. It's a far more intricate tale of contracts and consequences, of a deal struck with our own physiology. When you take one of these injections, you are essentially signing a contract with your body. The main clause is written in bold letters: you will lose weight. But it's the fine print, the subclauses and addendums, that we must now turn our attention to. Because it's in that fine print that the true cost of this revolution is detailed. Let's start with the most common clauses, the ones nearly everyone experiences to some degree. The very mechanism that makes these drugs so effective, slowing down gastric emptying, is a double-edged sword. Imagine your stomach as a bustling train station, with food arriving and departing on a regular schedule. GLP-1 agonists walk in and change the entire timetable. They hold the trains at the station for much, much longer. This extended layover is what sends the powerful "I'm full" signal to your brain. It's the biological source of the magic. But what happens when the station gets too crowded? When the platform is overflowing? You get nausea. You get vomiting, diarrhea, constipation, and debilitating abdominal pain. For many users, the first few weeks or months on these drugs are a constant battle with their own digestive system. It's a period of adjustment where the body is screaming in protest against this new sluggish reality. A user on a popular forum described it not as a loss of appetite, but as a permanent, low-grade food poisoning. They said, "I don't avoid cake because I'm not hungry. I avoid cake because I know with absolute certainty that if I eat it, I will spend the next 8 hours regretting every decision I've ever made." This isn't just about feeling a little queasy. We're talking about a fundamental shift in one's relationship with food. The food noise is gone, yes, but often so is the joy of eating, the pleasure of a shared meal, the comfort of a favorite dish. It's replaced by a constant, careful calculation. What can I eat that won't make me sick? It's a trade-off. You silence the obsessive thoughts about food, but in their place, you inherit a constant physical anxiety about it. For some, this is a price well worth paying. For others, it's a miserable existence that leads them to abandon the treatment altogether. But the fine print of this biological contract extends far beyond the gut. As the body begins to shed weight at a rapid, almost unnatural pace, other systems start to send out alarm signals. We see reports of persistent fatigue and dizziness, a consequence of drastically lower calorie intake. The body, sensing a famine, starts conserving energy, making everyday tasks feel like climbing a mountain. Then there's the hair loss. Telogen effluvium, as it's medically known, is the body's emergency response to a major shock, and rapid, significant weight loss is a major shock. The body decides that growing hair is a non-essential luxury when it believes it's starving, so it shifts those follicles into a resting phase, and months later, the hair falls out in alarming clumps. While often temporary, it's a deeply distressing experience that isn't always highlighted in the glossy success stories. And then we get to the really fine print. The clause is written in tiny, almost illegible font at the very bottom of the contract. These are the rare but severe risks, the ones that push this conversation from a matter of comfort to a matter of life and death. The most significant of these is the FDA's black box warning. A black box warning is the most serious caution the agency can issue. It means there is reasonable evidence of a serious or life-threatening hazard associated with the drug. For this class of medications, the warning is for a potential risk of thyroid C-cell tumors, including a rare type of cancer called medullary thyroid carcinoma. Now, it is critically important to add context here. This warning is based on studies in rats and mice. In those rodent studies, the drugs caused a dose-dependent and treatment duration-dependent increase in these tumors. However, rodents have a different sensitivity in their thyroid cells than humans, and to date, a direct causal link has not been definitively established in people. But the risk, however small or theoretical, was significant enough to warrant the FDA's strongest possible warning. It's a chilling reminder that we are manipulating a powerful hormonal system, and the long-term consequences of doing so over decades are still largely unknown. We are, in essence, the first generation of widespread long-term human trials. Beyond the official warnings, a new set of consequences is beginning to emerge from the real world, reported by patients and doctors on the front lines. There's the phenomenon now famously dubbed Ozempic face, or Wegovy face. It's the gaunt, hollowed-out, and prematurely aged appearance that can result from rapid fat loss in the face. The skin loses its plumpness and elasticity, leading to sagging and more prominent wrinkles. While any significant weight loss can cause this, the sheer speed at which it happens with these drugs seems to amplify the effect, leaving people looking years older, even as their bodies become slimmer. Perhaps more concerning from a health perspective is the issue of muscle loss. When you lose weight, you want to lose fat, not metabolically active muscle. But when weight loss is extremely rapid, the body doesn't discriminate. It burns both. Studies have shown that a significant portion of the weight lost on these drugs can be lean muscle mass. This is a critical problem. Losing muscle slows down your metabolism, making it harder to keep the weight off in the long run if you ever stop the medication. It impacts your strength, your stability, and your overall health, especially as you age. It's a classic example of winning the battle, the number on the scale, but potentially losing the war for long-term health and metabolic function. You might end up with a lower body weight but a higher percentage of body fat and a weaker, less resilient physical form. And finally, there's the psychological cost, the unwritten clause in the contract that deals with the mind. Silencing the food noise can be a profound relief for those who have been tormented by it for their entire lives. Feels like freedom. But what happens when that constant companion, that internal monologue, suddenly goes silent? For some, it creates a void. The obsession with food was a coping mechanism, a distraction, and without it, they are left to face other anxieties and issues they had been successfully burying under thoughts of their next meal. Furthermore, the very nature of the drug can create a sense of psychological dependency. The fear of stopping it, of the food noise returning with a vengeance, of the weight inevitably piling back on, can be a source of immense anxiety. It creates a new prison, where the fear of life without the injection is just as powerful as the old obsession with food. It shifts the burden from a battle of willpower to a battle of pharmacology, leaving many to wonder if they've simply traded one master for another. This is the reality of the fine print. A complex, interwoven tapestry of physical side effects, long-term risks, and profound psychological shifts. The miracle is real, but it is not free. The question that hangs in the air is not whether the contract works. It clearly does. But whether the price detailed in its clauses is one we, as individuals and as a society, are truly willing to pay. Let's open that contract and read the fine print. The clauses written in ink so faint you'd be forgiven for missing them. Because every deal with biology has its terms and conditions. The most common ones are listed right on the label, but they're often downplayed as mere inconveniences. Nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, constipation. These words on a pamphlet don't capture the reality of living with them. This isn't just feeling a little queasy after a big meal. For many, it's a persistent low-grade seasickness that dictates their entire day. It's waking up and wondering if you'll be able to keep your breakfast down. It's mapping out every bathroom on your route to work. It's canceling dinner plans with friends, not because you aren't hungry, the drug ensures that, but because you're terrified of a sudden, embarrassing digestive revolt in the middle of a restaurant. It's a fundamental disruption to the simple, unconscious rhythms of daily life. For some, these effects fade over time as the body adjusts. For others, they become a chronic tax on their well-being, a constant price paid for the number on the scale. But the physical toll goes beyond the gut. A new term has entered our cultural lexicon: Ozempic face. It's the phenomenon where rapid, significant weight loss, particularly from the face, leads to a gaunt, hollowed-out, and prematurely aged appearance. The fat pads that give our faces a youthful, healthy volume are some of the first to go. The result can be startling. You lose the weight, you fit into the clothes, but when you look in the mirror, the person staring back looks tired, stressed, and years older. It's a cruel irony. In the quest to reclaim a vision of health and youth, some find they've traded one aesthetic concern for another. They've sculpted their body but lost their face in the process. This isn't just vanity. It's about identity. The face is our primary means of expression, our calling card to the world. When it changes so drastically so quickly, it can be profoundly disorienting, creating a disconnect between how you feel and how you look. These issues, while significant, are often considered the cost of doing business. But what about the risks buried deeper in the contract? The ones that aren't about discomfort, but about potential irreversible harm. In recent years, a more frightening term has emerged from patient forums and news reports: gastroparesis. In simple terms, stomach paralysis. GLP-1 agonists work by slowing down how quickly your stomach empties its contents into the intestines. This is a key mechanism for making you feel full longer. But for an unlucky subset of users, this biological braking system doesn't just slow down, it slams to a halt. The stomach can essentially become a stagnant holding tank. Food putrefies instead of digests. The symptoms are horrific: severe, unrelenting nausea, violent vomiting of undigested food from hours or even days prior, debilitating bloating, and agonizing abdominal pain. Lawsuits have begun to pile up, with patients alleging they were never adequately warned that this slowing could become a permanent, life-altering paralysis. Imagine eating a small meal and feeling uncomfortably full for the next 2 days. Your body unable to process the very fuel it needs to survive. Doctors are still struggling to understand why this happens to some patients and not others, and crucially, whether the condition resolves after stopping the drug. For some, it seems it may not. They traded their weight problem for a digestive system that no longer functions, a biological traffic jam with no clear exit. And the stomach isn't the only organ at risk. The pancreas, the gland responsible for producing insulin and critical digestive enzymes, can become dangerously inflamed, a condition called pancreatitis. This isn't a mild stomach ache. It's a medical emergency that causes severe, radiating abdominal pain and often requires hospitalization. Repeated bouts can lead to chronic pancreatitis, permanently damaging the organ and increasing the risk of diabetes, the very condition these drugs were first designed to treat. The gallbladder is another potential casualty. Rapid weight loss from any method is a known risk factor for developing gallstones, painful crystals that can block bile ducts and necessitate surgery. These drugs, by virtue of their effectiveness, can accelerate this process, putting users on a fast track to a painful and serious complication. But the most chilling clause in this contract is the one that comes with the FDA's most serious caution: a black box warning. This isn't a suggestion, it's a skull and crossbones. On the packaging for these drugs is a warning about a risk of thyroid C-cell tumors. In studies on rats and mice, these medications caused a dose-dependent and treatment duration-dependent increase in these specific types of thyroid cancers. Now, the crucial caveat is that rodents are not humans. We have far fewer of these specific C-cells than rats do, and the relevance of this finding to people is still unknown. The pharmaceutical companies and the FDA are clear: we don't know if this happens in humans, but the signal in animal studies was strong enough to warrant the most severe warning the agency can issue. It's a massive flashing question mark hanging over the long-term safety of these drugs. The official recommendation is that anyone with a personal or family history of medullary thyroid carcinoma, or a rare condition called multiple endocrine neoplasia syndrome, type 2, should not take these drugs, period. For everyone else, it's a calculated risk, a roll of the dice with an organ wrapped around your windpipe. Beyond the purely physical, there is a profound psychological price that is rarely discussed. Food is not just fuel. It is joy, culture, connection, and comfort. These drugs don't just turn down the volume on food noise. For many, they mute the entire orchestra. The pleasure of a perfectly cooked steak, the comforting warmth of a bowl of soup, the celebratory sweetness of a birthday cake. All of it can be blunted, replaced by a chemical indifference. This is called anhedonia, the inability to experience pleasure, and when it's directed at one of life's most fundamental experiences, it can be deeply unsettling. People report feeling alienated at social gatherings, unable to participate in the communal ritual of sharing a meal. The thing that once brought them comfort now brings them nausea. They feel like a ghost at their own feast. This chemical rewiring of our most primal drives raises a monumental question. If you take a drug that fundamentally alters your relationship with hunger, pleasure, and desire, are you still entirely you? When the internal monologue that has driven so much of your behavior for decades is suddenly silenced, what rushes in to fill the void? For some, it's liberation. For others, it's a quiet, confusing emptiness. They've won the war against their appetite, but they feel a strange sense of loss for the battle itself. And perhaps the most significant clause of all, the one that ensures the contract is self-perpetuating, is what happens when you decide you no longer want to pay the price. What happens when you stop the injections? The biological gatekeeper is gone, the hormonal brakes are released, and the appetite, which has been suppressed and chemically caged, doesn't just return, comes back with a vengeance. The food noise returns, but now it's a roaring crescendo. The hunger is ravenous, primal, and for many uncontrollable. The weight, which had miraculously melted away, begins to creep back, and often it brings friends. This is the ultimate catch. These drugs are not a cure. They are a treatment, a lifelong subscription. To keep the miracle, you have to keep taking the medicine. For many, stopping is not an option if they want to maintain their results. This transforms the user from a patient into a permanent customer. The question then shifts from, what is the price of losing the weight? To a far more daunting one. What is the price of keeping it off forever? And for millions of Americans, the answer is anything. They will pay anything. Because the price of keeping the weight off, while financially staggering, can feel insignificant compared to the social, professional, and psychological price of carrying it. To understand the meteoric rise of these injections, you can't just look at the science or the stock market. You have to look at the society that created the demand. For decades, America has been a cultural pressure cooker for body image. It's a relentless, unspoken mandate woven into the fabric of our lives. It's in the movies we watch, the ads we consume, the social media feeds we scroll through for hours a day. It's the silent judgment in a board meeting, the anxious glance in a dressing room mirror, the casual, cutting remark from a family member at Thanksgiving. We've been conditioned to believe that a person's weight is a direct reflection of their character, their discipline, their worth. The message, whether overt or subliminal, is brutally simple. Thinner is better. It's more successful, more desirable, more valid. This isn't just a feeling. It's a documented phenomenon known as weight stigma or weight bias. Studies have shown that individuals in larger bodies are less likely to be hired, more likely to be paid less, and often receive substandard care from medical professionals who dismiss their health concerns as being simply a consequence of their weight. They are told, implicitly and explicitly, that their body is a problem to be solved, project to be managed, a failure to be corrected. Into this environment of immense pressure, we introduce diet culture. For half a century, the solution presented was always the same. Eat less, move more. It's a simple, elegant equation that places the entire burden of success or failure squarely on the individual's shoulders. And when the diet inevitably failed, as 95% of them do, the conclusion was equally simple. You didn't try hard enough. You lacked willpower. You gave in. It was a moral failing. This narrative has inflicted immeasurable psychological damage, creating a vicious cycle of shame, restriction, and rebound weight gain. People would spend years, even decades, at war with their own bodies, convinced they were fundamentally broken. But what if the premise was wrong all along? What if it was never just about willpower? In recent years, our understanding of the biology of weight has exploded. We now know that the human body has a powerful, ancient system designed to protect its fat stores. It's a survival mechanism honed over millennia of famine. When you lose weight, your body doesn't celebrate. It panics. It fights back with a full-scale hormonal assault. Your metabolism slows down, burning fewer calories at rest. This is called metabolic adaptation. At the same time, your body cranks up the production of ghrelin, the hunger hormone, making you feel ravenously hungry. And it suppresses leptin, the hormone that signals fullness, so you never quite feel satisfied. Your brain becomes hyper-aware of food cues, making that slice of pizza smell and look more irresistible than ever before. This isn't a lack of willpower. This is your biology, your fundamental programming, working against you with everything it's got. It's trying to push you back to what it considers your set point weight. This is why keeping weight off is monumentally harder than losing it in the first place. And this is precisely where GLP-1 agonists enter the story, not just as a medication but as a paradigm shift. They don't ask for more willpower. They don't demand more restriction. They rewrite the biological code. They hijack the very hormonal pathways that have been sabotaging people for years. The injections tell the brain, "You're full." They tell the stomach, "Slow down." They regulate the insulin response that drives cravings. For the first time for millions of people, the constant nagging food noise in their head simply goes quiet. This is the core of the buzz. It's the profound, almost spiritual relief of being freed from a lifelong battle. It's the liberation from self-blame. The drug offers a scientific explanation and a scientific solution, effectively telling the user, "It wasn't your fault. It was your biology, and we can fix that." This narrative is intoxicatingly powerful. It reframes obesity not as a character flaw, but as a chronic, treatable medical condition, just like high blood pressure or diabetes. And in that context, is taking a medication to manage it cheating? Or is it simply medicine? Is it the easy way out? Or is it finally a fair fight? This cultural reframing is being accelerated at light speed by the ultimate tastemakers, celebrities. While most remain tight-lipped, the dramatic transformations seen across Hollywood and on social media have become a walking, talking advertisement for these drugs. Every gaunt face on a red carpet, every impossibly slimmed-down reality star, fuels the speculation and the desire. It creates a powerful aspirational feedback loop. The rich and famous get access first, normalizing the treatment and setting a new, even thinner beauty standard. This trickles down, creating a frantic demand among the general public, who want to achieve the same seemingly effortless results. The Hollywood secret is no longer a secret, and its proliferation through culture has turned these prescription medications into the hottest status symbol in the country. It's not a handbag or a watch. It's a body type, one that whispers of access, wealth, and being in the know. The buzz isn't just on TikTok. It's in every high-powered office, every exclusive gym, and every suburban book club. It has become the defining conversation about health, beauty, and status in modern America. But this singular focus on the number on the scale, amplified by the celebrity circus, creates a host of new problems. The narrative of a magic bullet sets up wildly unrealistic expectations. The injections are a powerful tool, but they are not a panacea. The weight loss can stall. The side effects, nausea, fatigue, gastrointestinal distress, can be persistent and debilitating. And then there are the aesthetic consequences that nobody talks about on Instagram, like Ozempic face, where rapid fat loss in the face leads to a gaunt, aged appearance, or the significant loss of muscle mass alongside fat, which can have long-term negative health consequences. More insidiously, the reliance on the drug can create a new form of anxiety. The constant worry about securing the next prescription, the fear of a supply shortage, the dread of the day your insurance decides to stop covering it. The freedom from food noise can be replaced by the anxiety of drug noise. And what happens to a person's mental health when their entire sense of success and control is tied to a weekly injection? The drug can become a psychological crutch, overshadowing the development of sustainable, healthy lifestyle habits. The focus shifts from holistic well-being, nourishing your body, building strength, improving your cardiovascular health, to a narrow obsession with suppressing appetite and shrinking your size. The buzz is real, the results can be dramatic, but the story is far more complex than a simple before and after picture. We've spent so much time celebrating the destination of weight loss that we've barely begun to question the long-term consequences of the journey itself. Now that we understand the powerful societal forces driving this trend, we have to ask a more sober scientific question. What does it actually mean for the human body to be on these powerful, hormone-altering drugs not just for a year or two, but for decades or even a lifetime? The answer to that question is perhaps the most critical and most unsettling part of this entire story. Because these medications are not a cure. They are a treatment, a management tool. This isn't like taking an antibiotic for a week to clear an infection. This is, for the vast majority of users who want to maintain the results, a lifelong commitment. The moment you stop the injections, the biological spell is broken. The drug is no longer suppressing your appetite, no longer slowing your digestion, no longer telling your brain that you are full. And your body, which has been fighting this externally imposed state all along, comes roaring back. Studies are brutally clear on this. In one key trial for semaglutide, participants who stopped the drug after 68 weeks regained, on average, 2/3 of the weight they had lost within the following year. This isn't a failure of willpower. It's a demonstration of biology's raw power. Think of it like holding a beach ball under the water. You can push it down with all your might, and as long as you maintain that pressure, it stays submerged. But the second you relax your grip, the ball doesn't just float back to the surface. It shoots up, propelled by the very force you were using to suppress it. That's your body's set point. That's your hunger hormones, your metabolic rate, all snapping back to their baseline, often with a vengeance. This reality shifts the conversation from a short-term intervention to a chronic, lifelong dependency. It means committing to weekly injections, potential side effects, and a cost of over $1,000 a month indefinitely. for the rest of your life. And the weight that's lost and potentially regained isn't all the same. This leads us to one of the most significant and under-discussed risks of these drugs: the loss of muscle mass. When you lose weight rapidly, your body doesn't just burn fat. It also breaks down muscle tissue for energy. This is true of any rapid weight loss, but there is growing concern among physicians and researchers that with GLP-1 agonists, a disproportionate amount of the weight lost is lean mass. Some studies suggest that up to 40% of the weight shed on these drugs can be muscle, compared to a more typical 25% with traditional diet and exercise. Why is this so dangerous? Because muscle is your metabolic engine. It's the tissue that burns calories even when you're at rest. It's what keeps you strong, stable, and mobile. Losing it makes you weaker, more prone to injury, and critically, it lowers your resting metabolic rate. This means your body needs fewer calories to function, making it exponentially harder to keep weight off in the long run. If you stop the drug and then regain the weight, you often regain it primarily as fat, not muscle. So you end up at the same weight you started, but with a higher body fat percentage and a slower metabolism. This condition, known as sarcopenic obesity, is a fast track to frailty and a host of metabolic problems. It's trading one health problem for another, potentially more insidious one. It's why experts are now screaming from the rooftops that anyone on these drugs must be incorporating serious resistance training and a high-protein diet to preserve as much of that precious muscle as possible. Beyond the rebound and muscle loss, we enter the territory of more serious though rarer long-term risks. The most common side effects are gastrointestinal: nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, constipation. For many, these are manageable, but for a subset of users, they can be severe and persistent, leading to a condition called gastroparesis or stomach paralysis. The drug works by slowing stomach emptying, but in some individuals, it can slow it down so much that the stomach effectively stops working, leading to debilitating nausea, vomiting of undigested food, and severe abdominal pain. There are also documented risks of pancreatitis, a painful and potentially fatal inflammation of the pancreas, and ileus, a type of intestinal blockage. While these are not common, their incidence is high enough that studies have confirmed a statistically significant increased risk for users of GLP-1 drugs compared to other weight loss medications. Then there is the black box warning. This is the FDA's most serious safety warning, reserved for drugs with potentially life-threatening risks. On Ozempic, Wegovy, and Mounjaro, that warning is for a potential risk of thyroid C-cell tumors, including a rare type of cancer called medullary thyroid carcinoma. Now, it is crucial to state that this link was established in rodent studies. Rats and mice given the drug developed these tumors. The relevance to humans is still unknown and hotly debated. There has not been a definitive causal link proven in people, but the risk was concerning enough for the FDA to mandate the warning, especially for people with a personal or family history of certain thyroid cancers. When you are considering taking a drug for decades, even a small theoretical risk of cancer becomes a much weightier part of the equation. And the physical effects are only part of the story. We're also just beginning to understand what these drugs do to the brain and our mental health. Remember, GLP-1 receptors are not just in your gut. They are all over your brain, particularly in the areas that govern mood, reward, and motivation. By altering the signaling in these pathways, the drugs do more than just reduce food noise. There are increasing anecdotal reports and now formal investigations by regulatory agencies in Europe into potential links between these drugs and severe depression, anxiety, and even suicidal ideation. Is this a direct pharmacological effect on brain chemistry? Or is it a psychological consequence of the immense life changes that come with the drug? The rapid weight loss can lead to what's being called Ozempic face or Ozempic body. A gaunt, aged appearance from facial fat loss, and large amounts of loose, hanging skin that can be psychologically distressing and require further cosmetic surgery. The very identity of a person can be thrown into turmoil. We simply don't have the long-term data to fully understand the psychiatric risk profile. Perhaps the most profound unknown is what it means to fundamentally alter our brain's reward system for a lifetime. These drugs don't just reduce the pleasure you get from food. Some users report a more generalized anhedonia, a loss of pleasure in other things they used to enjoy, from a glass of wine to social activities, even shopping or gambling. They report feeling flat, apathetic. They've turned down the volume on the food noise, but in the process, they may have also turned down the volume on the joy of life itself. This isn't just about appetite. This is about hijacking one of the most ancient and powerful circuits in our brain, the dopamine-driven reward pathway that has motivated our species to seek food, find partners, and survive for millennia. We are in the very early days of a massive real-world experiment on the human brain. We are tinkering with the core machinery of motivation and desire, and we have no idea what the consequences will be 10, 20, or 50 years down the line. We have a powerful solution for the scales, but we're forced to weigh that against a scale of a different kind. One that balances the known benefits against a cascade of profound and unanswered questions about our long-term health, our bodies, and even our minds. And it's that last part, our minds, that might be the most uncharted territory of all. We've heard the almost mythical descriptions from users, the sudden silencing of food noise. For a lifetime of dieters, this sounds like a miracle. The constant, nagging internal monologue about what to eat, what not to eat, the guilt, the cravings, all of it gone, vanished. But what is actually happening in the brain to cause this? These drugs act on GLP-1 receptors, which, yes, are in our gut, but they are also densely populated in our brain. They're in the hypothalamus, which regulates hunger, but they're also in the brain's reward centers, the very same pathways that govern addiction, pleasure, and motivation. When we silence the food noise, are we just turning down the volume on cravings? Or are we fundamentally altering our relationship with pleasure itself? Anecdotal reports are flooding in from patients who have lost more than just their appetite. They've lost their desire for a glass of wine with dinner. They've lost the impulse to shop online. Some have even reported losing interest in gambling or other compulsive behaviors. On the surface, this sounds fantastic, but it raises a profound question. If a drug can dampen the drive for a cheeseburger, can it also dampen the drive for other things? The joy of a hobby? The thrill of a new idea? The very spark of ambition? We are, in a very real sense, medicating a core part of the human experience, desire. And we have no idea what the long-term psychological consequences of living in that chemically muted state will be. The brain is not a series of independent switches you can flip on and off. It's a deeply interconnected ecosystem. Turning down the noise in one area could have unintended, reverberating consequences across the entire landscape of our personality and consciousness. This biological revolution is triggering a societal one. The entire $60 billion a year American diet and wellness industry is on notice. For decades, it has thrived on failure, selling us programs, powders, and promises that rarely deliver lasting results. Now, a syringe can achieve in months what they couldn't in a lifetime. Gyms, diet plan companies, supplement manufacturers, they are all scrambling to figure out their place in a world where the fundamental problem they claim to solve might just be solved. But the ripple effect goes so much further. Think about the food industry. If tens of millions of Americans suddenly have suppressed appetites, what does that do to fast food chains? To snack companies? To restaurants that have spent a generation perfecting the art of supersizing? We could be on the verge of a great shrinking of portion sizes of grocery bills and of the profits for companies built on the American appetite. Social gatherings, so often centered around food and drink, might fundamentally change. The all-you-can-eat buffet could become a relic of a bygone era. We are re-engineering our bodies, and in doing so, we might just be forced to re-engineer the society we've built around them. But this future, this slimmer America, is not being offered to everyone. The most glaring and uncomfortable truth about these drugs is the price tag. With costs running over $1,000 a month and insurance coverage being a chaotic patchwork of approvals and denials, we are creating a new stark dividing line in society. It's a line between the haves who can afford to inject their way to a healthier weight, and the have-nots who are left behind. Obesity disproportionately affects lower-income communities and communities of color, the very people who are least likely to have the insurance or the disposable income to access these treatments. So, what does a world look like where the wealthy can simply buy their way out of a major public health crisis, while the poor cannot? It risks deepening existing inequalities, creating a visible physical caste system where body size becomes yet another overt signifier of economic status. It's a deeply troubling ethical dilemma, one that we are only just beginning to confront. Perhaps the most critical piece of the puzzle, the one that everyone considering these drugs needs to understand, is the question of off. What happens when you stop? The clinical trial data is brutally clear. The weight comes roaring back. This is not a cure. It's not a one-time fix. It is, for all intents and purposes, a lifelong treatment. Once you start, you may have to continue indefinitely to maintain the results. This transforms the decision from a short-term intervention into a lifelong commitment, with all the financial and medical baggage that entails. Imagine paying a car payment every single month for the rest of your life just to maintain your body weight. That is the reality for many. And it raises another chilling question. What are the effects of taking a powerful metabolism-altering drug for 20, 30, or 40 years? We don't know. The longest studies we have are only a few years long. We are the long-term study. An entire generation is stepping into the role of medical guinea pig, banking on a future where the benefits continue to outweigh a list of unknown risks that we won't fully understand for decades to come. And the train is not slowing down, it's accelerating. We are at the dawn of this new pharmaceutical age. The drugs we see today, as revolutionary as they are just the first generation. In the pipeline are even more powerful compounds, drugs that target not just one hormone like GLP-1, but 2 or even 3 different receptors simultaneously. Drugs like Eli Lilly's retatrutide, which in trials showed an astonishing average weight loss of over 24% of body weight. That's like a 200-pound person losing nearly 50 pounds. This isn't just about managing obesity anymore. This is about eradicating it on a biological level. We are witnessing a technological arms race aimed directly at the human metabolism. The buzz around today's injections will seem quiet compared to the roar that's coming. So where does that leave us? We stand at a monumental crossroads. In one direction lies a future where a chronic, stubborn disease that has plagued humanity and fueled an entire industry of shame is finally brought to heel by medical innovation. It's a future with less heart disease, less diabetes, longer lifespans, and a profound unburdening of both physical and psychological weight for millions. But in the other direction lie the shadows of our own ambition. A future where we have medicalized human appetite, creating a permanent, dependent class of users who have traded one set of problems for a host of new, unknown ones. A future where our relationship with food, pleasure, and desire is forever altered by chemistry. A future where societal divisions are carved even deeper by the scalpel of pharmaceutical access. The buzz is real because the results are real. These injections are not a fad. They are a profound medical breakthrough, a testament to human ingenuity. But they are not a simple magic bullet. They are a complex tool with immense power and an instruction manual that is still being written page by page in the real-world experiences of millions of Americans. The story of weight loss injections is not just a story about medicine or biology. It's a story about hope, desperation, and the universal human desire to change. It's about our society's complicated, often toxic relationship with weight. And ultimately, it's a story about the choices we make when science hands us the power to rewrite our own bodies, forcing us to decide not just who we want to be, but what we're willing to risk to become it.